Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Hey, well, thank you, Sean, for that rousing introduction. So once again, we're back, and we have a real special treat today. So most of you guys that read our blog know that Paolo is one of our most prolific painters, and his articles are just eye-watering. But his day job, and he has a day job, believe it or not, he just doesn't paint things all day, that he does PR for Slytherin Matrix Games, and he contacted me yesterday and said, hey, would you like to talk to the brain trust behind Valor and Victory, a game that I played when it came out, I think, on itch, and then I've been play testing now. So I'm going to introduce Lance and Barry. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
Good afternoon.
Good, thanks, Mitch. Yeah, good.
So Valor and Victory, this is not a new game. This game has some history behind it. Both on tabletop version, and this is not the first time this has been on digital. Do you guys want to talk about the history of the game a little bit?
Well, I guess I'll start. Valor and Victory started for me as a kind of a hobby, probably about 20 years or so ago. And around 2007, I decided to just release it online for free, not expecting it really to be that interesting to folks or to take off, but it really did. It really almost immediately gathered a following, especially on Board Game Geek. And from there, it's just grown. And I guess Lance contacted me about 3 or 4 years ago about doing a digital PC version of it, which I was really enthusiastic about. I never really wanted to publish it as a board game, but was kind of hoping someday that would happen. And Lance is actually making that come to fruition.
Yeah, so let me take the story up from there. So I had published a few small war games, digital PC games, starting in around 2017. I think the first one came out, and I really wanted to do a bigger game, a tactical squad-based game. And I had kind of two routes to go. One is I could design everything myself, do the rules myself, everything. But I realized that would be too much work. I was developing on my own at the time, and to write rules and then computerize that was just too much. So I looked around for a game that met what I wanted to do. And of course, I found Barry's game, and it was just ideal. So I actually reached out. I checked Barry just before this call. I actually reached out to you in February 2018. So that's when I contacted Barry on Board Game Geek and said, hey, look, I'd really like to make a computer version of your game. And of course, Barry is very enthusiastic about it. So I have basically been working on a computer version of his games since around that time. And then I think, Mitch, as you mentioned, it was, I did a kind of, I guess, a very early version, a demo version on itch.io. I can't remember how long that's probably 2 years ago. And then since then, I signed on board with Slytherin Matrix Games, and so I've been working behind the scenes, getting it ready for them to publish, basically.
We call that going to the dark side when you're in Slytherin Matrix. It's, so I think I was one of the first people to play it when it was on itch. I thought it was an interesting game. I hate bringing this up, but I have to. There's a lot of squad games out there. What made Valor and Victory one that, first of all, became very popular, and two, made you want to port it into a digital game?
I'll let Barry answer the first part of that one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess when I first started on it, I mean, I tried probably like a whole lot of folks out there for a long time to be an avid ASL player. And it just wasn't sticking with me. You really have to devote yourself to that game to
You
really.
know, it's not a game; it's a cult.
That's it. Yeah, it's
All
a, and I tried probably for 10 or 15 years to really play ASL, and I always kept going back to the simpler games that I really liked growing up. I guess my first love in wargaming was probably Panzer Leader, and I always thought, there's got to be a way to do a squad level game simpler than what was out there at the time. So I started probably late 90s working on the framework of V&V. And by the time I released it, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. There are a ton of squad level games out there. And there were a few that were coming out at the time that I released it that were probably on that difficulty level that I was looking for. One in particular that I enjoyed was Tide of Iron.
Very good game.
Yeah, it is. And if that one had been out before I released V&V, who knows what would have happened? I may not have released V&V, but I'm glad I did. I think it really struck a chord with a lot of people because they were looking for the same thing. They were looking for a playable tactical level game. And I think V&V really, really hit the spot for those folks.
Yeah, and from my side, I come from the squad leader track. I never actually moved into advanced squad leader ASL. I think partially because I got to the point in my life when board gaming unfortunately had to drop by the way, so I never made that step up. Probably luckily, so in my mind, I've always been, the original squad leader type person. I loved that first game. But when I was looking to do a computer version, a tactical squad-based computer version, I knew that trying to do something like squad leader or advanced squad leader was just, with all its thousands of rules, and both those games still have, especially ASL, have a huge cult following behind them. I think is the right word. People love these games. So trying to take that type of game and convert it into a computer game with that fan base behind it, I just knew it would never work, and technically it would have been beyond my time and ability to do it. So when I found Barry's game, it was like a gift from the gods, because his game had simplified, got rid of that's probably the wrong word, but simplified the core of the game down to something that was very practical for me to turn into a computer game, but yet kept the whole flavor or the feel that a squad-based game should have. So it was just to me, it was like a hand fitting into the glove. It was just a perfect combination between the two.
So we all have kind of a relationship with Squad Leader, and it's kind of our checkered gaming past. I think squad level games, some of them are amazing. Some of them, like ASL, and I went and covered. I did a podcast, an ASL event, and I noticed, like, I'm not a young man, but I was the youngest guy there.
Yeah.
And I wonder, with those tiny little counters, how much longer can the game go? And they keep doing the reprints. And, one of our writers on No Dice, No Glory is a huge ASL guy. And as much as I would love to play it, I own all the starter kits. I can't dedicate that kind of time to master a game system where there's games like, Conflict of Heroes from Academy Games, which is an amazing squad game. Mark Walker's 65, an amazing squad game. There's a lot of really good and fun squad games. When I see ASL, I guess they're having a good time. I don't know if they are. But looking through this game, a lot of people are immediately going to compare it to Squad Leader. Now, I know what's different about it, but what do you guys know is different about it? I want to tell the audience.
Well, it kind of took some of the core concepts, like Lance was mentioning. They're still in there, but they're really abstracted. And, one of the things that comes to the forefront of my mind when I think about ASL is there's actually a flow chart to get you through offboard artillery. You have to follow this huge long flow chart, in order to be able to use offboard artillery. And V&V, it's really abstracted. It's just kind of you when you start a scenario, it will tell you what you have access to, the batteries you have access to, by essentially giving you a counter for a certain level of firepower. And during your command phase, which is at the beginning of every turn, you just place those on the board and then resolve those attacks. So it really it still has it in there, but it really, really simplifies it. Now, the core mechanics that I think need to be a little more fleshed out are fleshed out, but those things that I think are secondary or tertiary are really, really abstracted.
And remember, James, the great game designer James Dunnigan, said it's okay to take good mechanics from very popular games.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. And so from playing this game in the itch version, it does have that squad leader feel, but it has a lot of neat stuff under the hood that you just mentioned, where I'm not like, okay, what appendix is how to start a fire?
Right.
It's the troops act like how they're supposed to act. I think the game also is aesthetically pleasing. From especially now playing the computer version. And thank you, Lance. I was able to get it going on Steam, so I can check it out one more time before we all talk. So when the game comes out, I know that you did the initial version of the game dealt with Normandy. But from looking at Board Game Geek, it looks like you expanded the game to include the Japanese, the Russians, and it really covers almost all of World War II. The computer version of V&V that's going to be coming out, and of course we're going to ask you when. What should we expect to see in that as far as nationalities and scenarios?
Yeah, so it's kind of a long answer to that. So I really, wanted to get this version of the game out there, and it's a bit like in the way that I guess Squad Leader launched, and in fact the way Barry's added an addition to his game is to get the base game out there, and I had to focus on something that Barry already had. So he as you said, he has his game already supports other nationalities, but his most recent box version supported Normandy, and that was a good area to focus on. And of course it's a very popular campaign amongst players, board game or otherwise, so it seemed a good one to start with. Now of course that's not where I want it to stop. So kind of the longer term plan is to get this first game out there, which is has the British, Americans, and Germans in there, and it's focused. Scenarios are focused around Normandy, at least the ones that we have put together and it's included in the game. Players can design their own scenarios beyond that. But for the future, my next goal is to get a Russian campaign in there, or a Russian-based scenarios based on the conflict in the east, and it's going to be based on Stalingrad. That's the possibly the next one. And Barry himself is looking at Arnhem. So once we get this first version out, get feedback. That's another very important thing. And there are some features from Barry's game that we just didn't have the time to get them in, that we need to get into the game as well. So we'll get those in, in subsequent releases. But the Russians would definitely be the next nation. And then I guess, and this is, I haven't really thought beyond that right now, but I guess the next one would be probably to move it to the Pacific theatre as well, so that the people that are interested in that theatre would be would be able to play their favorite battles as well.
Yeah, and even before that, you have a hell of a decision to make, because I can't think of two more iconic battles than Stalingrad and Arnhem.
Right.
So whatever the next expansion is going to be, we're dealing with a lot of rubble. The Germans feature in both of them, but I always love reading books about Arnhem, because I think I was 10 years old when A Bridge Too Far came out, and I love that movie. So, I'm sure based on that, you guys are going to go do Stalingrad, of course, but just my luck. But yeah, those are just two awesome battles to portray. So
You,
go ahead.
you know what I really want to do is I was watching the other day is the bridge at Remagen. Is I really want to just get that one, get a map board set up on the computer version and get that one laid out.
Yeah, that would be
that'd
pretty
be a good
neat.
one too.
Yeah, it'd be a bit of a one-off because it's not such a well-known campaign behind that. But as a one-off, I will get that into the game at some point.
And yet another movie from that.
Exactly.
Right.
So, which is something that I was going to ask, but it was going to ask later. When you guys write the scenarios, they're snippets of history, because I think it's just, you can't put a whole, especially at the squad level, you can't put a whole battle in there. You could put snippets of the battle that give you the flavor. But what guided the scenarios and missions that went in the game? Was it historical facts? Was it more pop things like movies, or just personal interest?
For me, when I design them, it's actually historical fact is probably the most important thing for me. Most of the ideas or inspiration for the scenarios I do either come from the Osprey book series or magazine articles, and I look for that, like you said, snippet. I look for those little snippets that actually could translate to a decent battle, but still keep that true historical flavor to them.
Yeah, and that's a trade-off game designers make.
Right.
Because I think all of us that wargame have OCD, so we want to make it totally historically believable. But it's, what I noticed with squad games, and I'm addicted to them as well, but even with ASL, the Tractor Factory is 8 hexes on a map?
Yeah.
In real life, it would be 16 maps.
Right.
So, as long as you're giving the players the flavor. So I've played through the game, the original, and play testing it now. I think you guys hit that flavor pretty well. What was the hardest thing to kind of put in the game, or to translate from the board game version to the digital version?
Yes, there's a couple, 2 or 3 areas I could cover there. So one of them is the biggest one I had to solve was opportunity fire. So in the board game, the moving player moves their counters, and then the opposing player can say, if they've got units that are in line of sight, stop there, I'm going to fire at you, opportunity fire. And I had to think about the fact that this game would also be available. I wanted it to be available as a play-by-email game, and of course, that very situation does not lend itself to play-by-email.
Not at all.
So I had to make a decision, kind of fairly early on, is what to do about opportunity fire to solve that, but also to try and give the player some excitement from their opportunity, from that event happening. Now, the reality is that I think the statistics I've seen is that 90% of people that play, especially board games, they play solo. So I don't know quite how they overcome that in a solo a board game. But also that it's a very high percentage of computer games as well. People play solo. They want to play against the AI. They don't want to play long games, play by email. And I'll come to that in a moment. So I had to make a decision what to do about opportunity fire. And in the end, I decided the best way to do it was to let the AI, the computer, control opportunity fire, so it would be equal for both sides. That it's logic that it uses this to decide who to fire if there's an opportunity, and should it fire, and how much firepower from a stack should it use is controlled by the AI, and it's equal for both players. So that kind of solved the play by email situation, because the player that's active, the one that's moving at that time, they will move, and then the AI will control whether they fire. And of course, when it's switched around to the other player, the same same logic will come into play. So I thought that would be fair. So that was one. Now the other big one was Casualties. So in the board game, when you suffer casualty points, the player that receives those casualty points can decide how they allocate those casualties. So maybe you, for example, if you've got a unit carrying a support weapon, you might not want that destroyed. You might decide that another unit in that stack gets destroyed. Again, I had to think about what that meant when you're playing a computer game. And again, I had to think about the fact that, play by email was going to be hopefully a big factor, but also the flow of the game on a computer version, I felt wouldn't work well if every time you received, you moved your units, you received, say, 2 casualty points, and then you had to stop and decide what you want to do. I just didn't feel in a computer game that would work that well. And also, I had to think about the fact that it's already hard enough to program the AI, but then to get the AI to make a choice about casualty points at the same standard as a human player would be, of all the situation awareness they've got, and then being able to plan ahead. So, it's incredibly difficult, despite Google being able to, Google spend billions of dollars at AI as an example,
and you don't have that kind of money to try.
Exactly. So to make it fair against the AI, bearing in mind what I said earlier, that a large percentage of people will play this game on their own against the AI, I decided the fairest way of doing casualty point allocation was to let the computer decide. So it has I think it has I've tried to make it as logical as possible, that when say a stack of 4 units with maybe a leader in there and 3 other units, and a couple of them are carrying support weapons, is to try and allocate it in a way that I would want that to happen, so that what I felt was the most important units were the last ones to take those casualty points. And I also thought that, again, that would be fairer on both sides. For the AI, the AI, of course, follows those same rules when it takes casualties, and the player has to also follow those rules as well. Well, the AI actually, allocates those for them, so they don't have to worry about that. And that, of course, then translates into being able to, again, support play by email in the sense that you don't have to return the games just so that someone can pick what losses they're going to have.
So will there be a head-to-head version?
Well, there is. So
Okay.
There is a hot seat version. Now, of course, hot seat means, I guess, a couple of things. One is if you play it at home with your friend next to you, then you can both. There is a hot seat. You can play both sides can be human players, and of course, Steam themselves actually support remote play.
Yes, they do.
And this game, I think, will work really well with that. I've tried it out with one of the beta testers early on, and I think this game really suits that. I'm surprised. I don't know how popular that way of playing is on Steam. I don't feel Steam pushed that enough, but basically, in answer to your question, yes, 2 players, whether they're sat side by side on the same computer or they use remote play option on Steam, can both be playing the game.
So, just my 2 cents, especially since COVID, I cannot tell you the amount of times in the last year I've played head-to-head on Steam, I've played on Tabletop Simulator, I've played on Vassal. Because, one of the things I enjoy about the hobby is the face-to-face interaction. Well, that was taken away a year ago, and I think the games that I'm playing more have a really slick and easy-to-use, online, 2-player presence. So I think a lot of wargamers are totally going to like that. I think the problem comes with finding opponents on there.
Right.
If they're a
Right.
matchmaker. Some games use Discord for that. There's many different ways to run that and do that. But I think those games are just very popular. I'm part of a professional wargaming group on Discord, and we have Wargame Wednesdays. and we played ICBM not too long ago from Slytherin, and we tried to play games, but we're doing it remotely because we have to. I think games like that, I think this game especially, I think is going to be a lot of fun on that medium. Maybe we should hold No Dice should hold the tournament online for the game when it comes out.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah,
That would be great. Yeah.
that would be kind of interesting. And I'm sure Paolo will. It's weird. Like well, we have to give away a prize. Well, obviously they're already going to have the game. I'm curious to see what they would ask for. Oh, I'll take War in the East.
Right.
I don't know about that. How'd you do so well? Yeah, and recently, Army General Command Staff College had a drive on Moscow tournament for a day and a half, and on Vassal, and I thought it was a ton of fun because that game you can play online in an hour. It's just how we're going to game now. But you said something interesting. So we had in our previous few podcasts, we had like the Sweet 16 of War Games, and we whittled it down to one winner, like the basketball tournament. And the moderator was Liz from Beyond Solitaire. But we mentioned the fact that most war gamers, and I'm pointing, nobody can see that I'm pointing at my shelves of war games, that most of those are going to get played solo. And I think now having a way to enjoy the same experience digitally as we can with a board game or even a miniatures game, I think is really important. I remember many years ago, a developer asked me, what do you think is the next big thing that's going to happen in games? And I go, everybody has a smartphone. It'd be great to play a tabletop game where you incorporate a smartphone.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody has one of those, and I guess somebody will be stupid enough to do that one day. A lot of things I say are just really harebrained. Shouldn't be listened to by anybody.
I'm surprised that someone hasn't taken that up, because there's a lot of games, especially some of the more recent games, where you now have a pack of cards that drive some of the events in the board game, right?
I love those games.
Or you have a chit system where you draw a chit out, and that could decide who the active player is. And I think in some instances tells you what, in an American Civil War game, for example, which core you can activate that turn and do something with. That to me cries out for someone to take those particular parts of a board game and put them into an electronic version, so that you can do, as you said, you can have a board game set up, and some of those mechanics of the deck and that could be incorporated into a mobile app, or on your PC, and then does that part of the game for you, selects a card, reshuffles the pack if it's needed, or puts the chips back into the jar, as it were, for the next phase.
So when you were saying a Civil War game, I'm curious to see what game you were thinking of, because I know which one I thought of right away.
Which one was I thinking of? You caught me now. I can't think which one it was.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I guess we just had Herman Lutman on that does the Blind Swords game.
Right.
His Gettysburg game just finished up.
I have just. I supported that. I supported that one. I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to that 15-foot square map board.
Oh, I can't wait. And you should. We actually did an interview with him, and I said, well, why does that work for your game? And some games it doesn't work. And he explained it. Where he is a consummate game designer, and a lot of his games were hits, but sometimes that chit pull system doesn't work. Or the cards, but yeah, I'm very excited for that. Barry,
yes.
No offense that we're talking about other designers.
But, no offense taken at all.
Which leads me to a question, since I think all of us are longtime grognards. We usually save this question for the end, but I'm going to ask it now because I think it's come up. What games got you into this hobby that you knew that 20, 30 years later, you'd still be pushing around cardboard or minis? What was that gateway drug?
Well, I guess, like I mentioned early, I guess my first I guess it's the first memory I have of purchasing a war game, and that was Panzer Leader. I remember paying $12 for it at a small hobby shop in Roanoke, Virginia. And
Wow.
but some of the other games, a lot of Avalon Hill games from that time, Rick Tofen's War and War at Sea, and
I think you and I shared a closet back then.
yeah, I mean, essentially those were the games that really, I can go back even further. I guess I still have a copy to this day, but Milton Bradley's Carrier Strike
Yeah.
was one of my first favorite war games, and that kind of led me to the hobby games, to the Avalon Hill games, and then from there it was all downhill. I've been playing since the mid to late 70s.
Wow. Lance, I know that you got some there too.
Yeah, I actually started with Lego bricks. If I go right back to the beginning, right to the core, I can remember I would, have red bricks and blue bricks, and the red bricks would be one side and the blue bits would be the other side, and I would play with them. I don't know what rules I was using. I was very young, so that's where it started. And then I moved into Airfix soldiers quite heavily as a kid. Weird thing is, I never painted them, apart from the vehicles. But the soldiers I never painted. The vehicles I love making the kits for the vehicles. Yeah. And then I discovered board games, and so there was a, in the old days, you could go into shops and they'd have this little war game section. It didn't fit in with anything else. A little corner shop would have a couple of war games, but the one I think that really infused me was the one before we talked about, Squad Leader, which I asked my parents for as a birthday present. And confession here, it's the only time in my life when I knew the parcel had arrived, I knew they had it, and I actually looked for it and just looked at the box, and I just remember that. I still feel guilty about it. It's the only time I've ever hunted out for a present and just wanted to look at it and imagine what it was going to be like.
Oh, we all did that.
Yeah.
We all did that.
But,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but of course, then marriage life came in, and adult life, and I had a period. And I know a lot of people have this war game enthusiasm, where I just didn't do anything.
I took a couple of years off too. We all have to, but then I got back into it hot and heavy. So looking at the market now, I've gotten to arguments with gamers because that's kind of what I do. I think board gaming I'm worried about us aging out as a hobby, but we're also seeing more games hit the market than ever before. Now, you guys definitely had to look at marketing while undertaking this project. What do you guys think of the state of health of our wargaming hobby? Do you feel it's growing in some areas? Is it shrinking? Is there anything that would cause you concern as developers and designers?
I'll let Barry go first.
I think for the board game side of things, and I'll let Lance touch on it, but I think digitally, I think things will probably still grow, especially with things like Arcade 1-Up, who does those classic home arcade games now, just released, or they're going to release what they call the Infinity Table, which allows you to play board games on essentially a coffee table. So I think the digital side will probably continue to grow even for war games, but for board games, I think it's changing. I think it's a sign of the times, zeitgeist, that the board games themselves are kind of changing to fit with what folks like these days. There are more. I see more solo or co-op war games coming out, more card-driven war games. So I think as long as those continue, or if they change with the times, I think they'll still be a part of it. But I'm not sure if the traditional classic hex and counter war game, how healthy it's going to be, because it's really fallen off from the glory days of Avalon Hill and SPI. And I think it will probably continue to fall, like you said, as we age out. But I think there will still be a niche market there for those things.
Yeah, and you bring up something really great about, the cards. That was taken definitely from Euro games. There's a lot of true grogs will never play a game without dice.
Right.
I have a ton, like Combat Commander, an amazing game. no dice.
Right.
You draw cards. A lot of, I think, newer gamers are very much attracted to what they play, on the very light hobby side. So I'm kind of glad that, you have some developers that are playing around with that. And I think solo games are so important. Us at No Dice, we're really good friends with David Thompson, and he's put out some amazing solo games. And I'm like, one day you're gonna have to put out another two-player game like Undaunted or something like that. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, he understands and reads the market very well. Lance, as a digital designer, you probably have less to worry about.
Yeah, the question you asked is really interesting because I agree with the statement, and I definitely see that with the games that I've previously sold is when I get emails from people or people commenting about the game, they're definitely from an older generation. So I totally agree with that statement that the hobby is, particularly this particular area in the hobby, war games, is aging. But then I look at the market in general, and this is not just digital, but miniature figures. There's thousands of figures to choose from now that were never available when I was a kid. And the quality of them is fantastic, and they're not just supporting fantasy, but they're supporting every range in military history you could think of. The most obscure nations and vehicles are covered for, and as you said, there's more board games available now than ever before. It's true that they're not selling in the, I think Squad Leader sold 200,000 copies or something. They're not selling that volume, but their choice is fantastic. And I keep thinking to myself, well, it can't just be people of a certain age. I don't even know what that certain age is. Let's say 50 plus, but buying these things. There must be a younger generation buying them. Now, is it a case that we just haven't seen this younger generation yet move into, come to the hobby in a different way? That let's call it a more traditional hobby, which is they could move from computer versions into maybe miniatures, and then into board games, or board games and into miniatures. I'm not so sure. And we have some big, AAA computer companies that are investing money in strategy games, right? Total War, for example, that is right. Exactly. That's basically taking, to me, that's taking a mixture of both, right? A kind of, you can imagine it as a board game, but you can also imagine that as miniatures. And they're not wasting their money. They're making money on these games, big money. So there's a huge market out there, and I don't think that question is so easy to answer anymore about is the hobby dying out, because I would just say, well, look at the Total War series. It's been going for, I think I saw, it's 20 years since the first one launched, and they're still bringing new versions out. So I'm not convinced. I agree with what the polls will say and statistics might show, but I think this hobby is going to be around for a long time.
I definitely think we'll be around for a long time. It's interesting how you guys answered the question, because I think with the advent of new games and digital games, it's going to be around for a long time. I see digital games as a way to bring in that younger crowd.
I agree. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah,
because you like V&V. There's a board game version. One of the things from talking to millennials, and I have to, is that while they enjoy, the screens, they game casually more than I think our generation did. I'm assuming we're all around the same age, old as hell. That they like gaming for the social face-to-face interaction, which we haven't had in a year. But I think if we could rope them in with a really good video game that kind of gets their appetite going for the in-person experience, I think that's good. So, which leads me to ask, if I've only played the digital version, if I were to buy V&V, would I know how to play it right out of the box? Is there any difference?
There probably a small learning curve, but I think you would understand the core concepts really well. I mean, the digital version, it pops up the combat charts for you that you can look over, and I mean, all that still stays the same. So I think that, I think you'd have a really good grasp of it initially.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
agree. You would have a good grasp of how to play the game. The difference would be with the ones I spoke about earlier is, you have to work out the casualties yourself, and of course you have to roll the dice yourself and look up tables yourself. So that would probably be the learning curve, right?
I was going to say that may make some people groan that they say, "Oh, you mean I have to calculate the casualties
exactly,
myself?"
Yeah. Work out your ratios and percentages, ratios, right?
And and I was told I'd never use the math I learned. There you
Yeah,
go.
Right.
So I know you guys are in the middle of play testing, but when are folks going to be able to enjoy this game?
I'm not
I
sure
know,
if.
hard question.
Well, I know the answer to this question. It should be available within the next 2 months.
Okay. And then a couple of weeks after that, we'll have that first tournament.
Yeah, that first tournament. Yeah, that's something we're going to be testing actually. Hopefully in the next week or so, it's an actual tournament. The game's, as you mentioned, has been available for beta test since I think beginning of this year. I think it was March actually, and I've been playing a few games played by email, so that works really well. But we haven't yet tested a tournament out. But yes, that should be, once the game's launched, we should be able to do a tournament almost immediately after that.
So I'm going to get Germans, I'm going to get Brits, I'm going to get Americans in
Right.
that first. And how many missions am I looking at?
We're looking at, I think it'd be 20. 20. But of course, the player themselves, there's a scenario editor in there that allows you to basically, very much like the board game. So you can't create your own maps. The maps are basically all custom. You won't have the ability to create your own maps, but you can take the map boards and basically create your own scenarios as well, which some of the testers have been doing.
All right, here's an important question. How many of those 20 scenarios feature my favorite World War II tank, the Churchill?
Oh, wow. I think that would be none at this point.
Okay.
I think it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I love that tank. I don't know why.
Oh, it's a beast.
It is.
It's an infantry beast. So, but I don't think I've designed any scenarios yet that actually call
it's
for
available.
the Churchill.
It is available.
Right.
To use,
it
right?
is.
Yeah.
It's in there, but it's not in any of the current the actual scenarios that will come with it. But
I'm gonna have to throw them in all the scenarios. Well, because the box. Had I seen this box cover for Valor and Victory with the Churchill on it, I would have bought it just because it has that really cool picture on it, and tried out the game afterwards. I wouldn't even looked it up on Board Game Geek. I would have just started playing it. And it's just something about what attracts me to a certain game. So with it being Normandy, with the first one, and this is one of those no kidding questions, is that because that is just like the most popular event in World War II in the Western world?
Well, when I first released Valor and Victory as a free desktop published game, I wanted it to kind of just be a wargaming kit where folks would just print the components and print the rules, and then they could take their own, design their own scenarios or take their own favorites from Squad Leader or whatever and kind of convert them to the game. But folks kept asking me for actual scenarios and kind of they would say, where do I start? Because it was really essentially just an assortment of counters and maps and the rules. And so I knew eventually I'd have to kind of give them a starter set. And at the time when I really started thinking about the starter set, I was reading a lot on Sword Beach. So that's kind of where I wanted to start. Is just to pick with Normandy, and I'd actually, before Lance came along, had kind of come up with a plan that I was going to focus just on the Western Front, because that's always been my favorite part of the war, and I was going to design several box sets that would stretch from D-Day to Market Garden, and then I was kind of going to call it quits, except I was going to re-release box sets that had just counters and maps for the other fronts, so that folks could do their own thing. But now that it's really kind of starting to take off, especially for the computer game, I'll keep designing for the other fronts as well. But that's kind of how it started, is since I was really deep into Sword Beach and D-Day, I just kind of wanted to start with a box set focusing on that.
You know what battle I wish would be gamed more? Would be Monte Cassino and that whole slog up the boot.
Oh yeah,
I find I actually went there, and I find it so fascinating because it was like a who's who of German units and of allies. I mean, everybody was there except for the Russians, and it's just such an interesting story. But it's kind of the Italian forgot. The Italian front is like the forgotten front,
right.
Because they were the D-Day Dodgers, as some people would call them.
Yeah, I always kind of wanted to focus on starting with maybe the invasion of Sicily and then moving over to Italy and up the boot.
Yeah, there's so many, it's because I know from reading on Board Game Geek, and I'm just like going through it now. And yesterday I had an argument with somebody that I help work on their game. It's a Great War Miniatures game, and I go, stop crowdsourcing ideas, because everybody wants to put these little things into games like that just don't make any sense. And with you, I see that there's Martian counters here. Did you have a lot of the community kind of guiding you along with the later development of the later parts of the game?
I always ask questions. The community, I kind of always got them involved. I really wanted them to. But the Board Game Geek guys have always been great, and I've gotten to be friends with a lot of them, and I've always kind of kept them in the loop as far as development or changes or what do you guys want to see, or and they've been really. I mean, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's great. A lot of folks don't get that experience because war gamers we're a bit of a whiny crowd. Hey, well, folks, we didn't realize it, but Craig failed his morale roll, and he fled off the battlefield. So, I'll try to edit this as best I can. I think it was in the middle of me talking about how great this game is and how excited I am for it coming out. Once again, we will have a full breakdown of the game, but one of the things that we were talking about is the sights and sounds of the game are very interesting because it builds that kind of sheer terror that ground combat is, with all of a sudden the machine gun starts firing at you and the birds stop chirping. So I think that there's a lot here for this game, but you're right. I didn't really notice like how the sound was, how much design that, development you guys put into it. But now it's something like, I'm not going to be able to see it the same way again. So yeah, we're getting close to, I don't want Craig to run away. I don't know why he's been doing this. But I want to thank you guys so much for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome.
Once
Yeah,
again,
it's
I'm
been
a
great.
fan. I'm a total fan. I'd like to have you guys on as we get closer to launch, and hopefully we'll get some other play testers on to kind of bat around some of the interesting things we saw during play testing. But folks out there, I'm excited for this one, and I know you're saying, yeah, he gets excited for a lot. I do. It's because I have little excitement in my life. No, this really is a great game. I think that you're going to like it. And, I know we compared it to other games in this chat, but it really stands on its own. It has some really slick and neat mechanics that are kind of under the hood that makes gameplay fast, fun, and easy. And I think we mentioned it's challenging. And that's one of the things I liked about it, is that I couldn't win right away. I hate that. So it makes me want to play the game more. But yeah. Well, I'll let you guys hit us with a last word. and then we will send it back to the studios.
Well, I appreciate you having us on. I look forward to it as well. I think, like I'd mentioned before, Lance has really put a lot of effort into the digital version, and you talk about the sounds and the original soundtrack that goes in the game, but he hired the venerable David Pentland, who does some fantastic military art, to do the illustrations for the scenarios, and so he's really gone above and beyond to.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah.
Because
So,
that art for the missions, I think, is really kind of neat.
That's David Pentland, isn't it?
Yeah,
Lance?
David Pentland. Yep, he did those. Yep.
What about smells? Can we get smells in the game?
We can try. Well, the best way of doing that, of course, is you buy the computer version and the board game, and then you can smell the counters as you're playing them, right?
Yeah, but that's not the smell of me and the guy next to me when an MG42 opens up on us.
Yeah.
It's a distinct smell. That I don't want to get an E rating for this, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm going to send it back to Sean, but thank you guys so much. Valor and Victory from Slytherin Matrix Games. Check it out. Go to Board Game Geek, type in the same, and tell us what you think of this game if you've played it in the past. And once it comes out, we'll have these guys back on. So back to you, Sean, in the studio.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.